Caroline, thank you so much for coming onto the show. Now,
Thank
yeah, you are an artist based in New York City on a
you.
mission to promote community through arts and food education. I would love to dive into your business over at Crate and Plate. Can you tell us about the work that you do at Crate and Plate and where your journey began?
Oh God, those are two very, very broad spectacle questions, but I'll try very hard. So basically, my create mission with my company, Create and Play, is to pretty much promote whatever community we can build and whatever unity can come together with using food and food and the arts actually. And education for that. And surrounding education doesn't necessarily have to be the formality of necessarily just learning more about it through a book or through just more so being together while doing it and letting it be the thing that links us together through any difference, really, through any cultural difference or any orientation whatsoever. It's just the thing that I noticed throughout my years of teaching has been the ultimate thing that will bridge everybody. And that word is used a lot, but it really does have the emotional and the physical and the mental connection that brings everyone together. And so how did this start? This all began because I went to art school and I graduated way back when, and I won't say when, but I will say but I will say that I got a great, throughout my life, I had a great artistic background and kind of putting it into place. I'm sure my parents wanted me to be more academically sharp, but it was kind of what you're blessed with and what you kind of center yourself with. My father is a physician, but he also is a musician. He went to Juilliard, friggin' overachiever that he is. Went to Juilliard to study to become a maestro. Actually, when he was doing working at a hospital. Actually,
Wow.
no, right? It's okay. And then he conducted a chamber orchestra for a while he was still doing medicine, and he's still doing medicine. He will never fully retire.
Mhm.
And so basically, my brother, my sister, and I all grew up with a musical background, with an
Wow.
artistic background. We all just basically were pretty much encouraged to go through a route of basically trying to let that be not so much an outlet at the time, but more so just something that to enrich your life. And
Mhm.
and my parents met through orchestra rehearsal in college. So, I mean, I encourage everybody to, find your way with the arts. And so basically, yeah, it kind of became, I studied art in college. For my undergrad, I went to Carnegie Mellon University, studied art. I studied, went through the pre-college route before I even got to there at lots of great schools. Went to Rhode Island School of Design for pre-college and Parsons in New York City. I live in a place where basically it's available to us,
Mhm.
just the arts, the music, dance. I studied all three of those. Um, you know, and so that said, I didn't want to be a teacher when I got out of college. I was resistant, very resistant, even though my mom was like, you should go teach, you should go do this. And
Mhm.
I had worked with children and I loved working with kids, but I didn't know if that was the route I wanted to take.
Mhm.
But again, sometimes life chooses you instead. And at the time, I heard that early childhood really liked artists. They were willing to take them on for teaching. And so what ended up happening was I ended up taking a a very low paying job as an assistant teacher at a Hasidic Jewish school and in Connecticut. And so I couldn't have been more different than everybody there. I was one of the few non-Judaic teachers that they had, but thank God I grew up with basically knowing some of the Jewish culture, and basically because of my best friend who very much introduced me to it. And so it took off from there. It took on a life of its own. I found that I loved teaching, and that was just part of who I guess I was supposed to be in that realm. I could have hated it,
Hmm.
but I ended up really just going through with it, teaching in classrooms, different classrooms for about 15 years, 16 years.
Wow.
Um, and so after that, I got my master's degree in art education from School of Visual Arts in the city,
Hmm.
and that was that was a wonderful program, but it was tough. It was at the time you could squeeze 2 years of your life into like 2 years of your life into like 10 months.
Oh my
And
gosh.
yeah, do your student teaching, like, your secondary student teaching, your elementary student teaching, write your thesis, research your thesis, go to your classes. But I'm forever grateful because if I'm going to be honest, I saved $47,000 and and I got a great education. And from there, I continued trying to teach, but the economy took over, and most of the jobs that were out there for art teachers were not readily available. And so, luckily, I was still able to find jobs in schools because I was experienced. Um, but as classroom teachers, however, I just ended up being, kind of always kind of coming back to the arts in my life and the arts and being able to know how to teach more about it and how to
Hmm.
get to relate to more people. And so pretty much that's how it all came into place. I started contributing to our school auctions, like art lessons, cooking lessons, and
Okay.
they were high earners, and I was very happy for that. And I loved doing it so much and was always able to contribute that in my team in our classrooms. So I was like, the best advice I was ever given was, if something really gives you that much joy and if it's something you can do, then just do it. And so then I became unemployed at one point, and that's when it really started. I just knew I had to kind of form this part of my life, and so that's what really happened. I started putting tutorials online for people to learn how to cook
Hmm.
uh, at the same time because everyone was asking for recipes. It was the time when blogs were becoming the big thing, cooking blogs. And
Yeah,
so
yeah,
I jumped on that train. and
yeah.
But also I wanted to find a way to kind of put my art life into it. And so one crazy, wonderful thing that ended up happening was that I got an opportunity to write professionally. And that
Wow.
was a way to kind of what I say is the great emergence of your art life and your food life kind
Hmm.
of come together. And learn it you over a course of God, now it's like 7 years doing this professionally. It's like it is a wild ride, and it's really, you come with a lot of setbacks, but it also opens your eyes to a lot of things that I think I wouldn't have seen if I had stayed in schools. So it's definitely, it's a long story, but that is pretty much it. So that's why we're here today. So
And I love that you brought up that moment when writing sort of became that connective tissue between your art life and what you have that background in. As an artist and an entrepreneur, I know how difficult it is to build a sustainable and a meaningful business, and it can be a incredibly slow and long process. Sometimes it
yeah.
just feels like you're like pushing this creative vision up a hill and you're dealing with one setback after the next. What have you been struggling with the most when it comes to growing this idea and growing this brand, and what are some of the sort of eye-opening lessons that you've learned throughout this process?
Oh God, there's a lot. Really, just to scratch the surface on it, just realizing how hard it really was going to be. It's like you come up with an idea and you get so excited about it, and you just want it to grow its wings, so to
Hmm.
speak. One of the I hate to say it, but one of the more interesting parts about this that I learned was just how undervalued you can feel. Um,
Hmm.
or just how much you can contribute, do contribute, and yet you will always come second to somebody else who for lack of better word, it's just kind of like, so how come it sounds better when they say it, but not when
Yep.
I
Yep.
do it?
Yep.
And
Hmm.
or
Hmm.
well, listen, it's also about timing, and it's also about
Hmm.
kind of trying to harmonize the fact that, listen, the world just kind of isn't there yet.
Hmm.
And one of the pieces of advice that I got from somebody was that, and you're given a lot of different advice for sure. But one of the, and some of it is just kind of like, okay, but I would really just say you got to follow your heart, what fits for you. There are lots of shortcuts that people could take that are offered up right there.
Hmm.
And needless to say, I'm going to be honest, I tried them and they didn't work for me. And so another thing was also just some people who really you feel it in your skin almost. You're just like, yeah, this is not the person you want to talk to be with. Their motive is not your motive.
Hmm. Hmm.
um, and I'll give the best example really, which is that I'm going to completely maybe pull up this kid's spot, but um, what had happened was somebody had asked if I would train his child for MasterChef Junior, and
Wow. Okay.
yeah, in a week. And
Wait, so like from scratch, like this kid is starting from zero?
it was a long story. He had already known how to cook, but at the same
Okay.
time, it was like his parents were very well aware of their shortcomings of how to help him. They had hired, sorry, Master Chef, if this is against your rules, but they but they had basically said, we hired somebody else. They can't do it anymore because they got another job. We were wondering if you could train him. And so I said, I can teach him. I don't know about training him, but
Hmm.
we'll see where he's at.
Hmm.
So my approach was very different from what they wanted.
Hmm.
And I came all the way down to their place with all my gear. For the record, I don't have a car with me. My husband takes our car to work, but I just came with all my gear, with my refrigerated backpack and all my groceries ready to go. And it was pretty bad. It was not
Oh
bad
no.
because he was a bad kid. That was not
Uh-huh.
it at all, ever. Most of the time, I will say it's never really the case.
Yeah.
However, the shortcut they were looking for was it just didn't jive with me. I was like, you want me to perform miracles in a week.
Hmm.
And it's like no amount of money they throw on the table was going to basically make that possible. And so I had to be honest, that's just who I am. I was honest with their parents and I said, look, this just isn't going to work.
Hmm.
I'm like, whatever he knows now, I'm guaranteeing you he will not learn anything more than right this second.
Yeah.
Unless he practices like crazy for the next
Uh-huh.
5 days. And I promise you, he's not going to.
Yeah.
And that was harsh, but it was the reality. I said, I could come here and fake you guys out, or I could basically tell you, look, he's just got to practice on his own.
Yeah.
And it's like any person who's a musician who practices with an instrument, it's like, if you want me to perform miracles, like, you're looking for something that the kids just ultimately got to find it in themselves to finish.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And we did I don't watch the show, but I did watch the one season they were on, and I was like, oh, okay, they didn't do too terribly. So you know so needless to say, I was still proud of them. I was. So yeah.
Wow.
So again, it's like, I'm sure people will, there are other people out there that would have just jumped and basically said, sure, I'll give you whatever you want. But I was like, no, that's not what I'm going to do. So, yeah.
Yeah, and that's one of the hardest things about um, conveying the value of art to people is, how do you quantify as an artist and as a teacher, how much this lesson should be, or how, like whether or not this thing is achievable. Like you're saying, trying to teach someone to cook within that week to be able to appear on MasterChef, like it's hard to to develop a sense of seasoning and in a sense of like how to mix ingredients and craft something, because that's stuff that like takes ages, takes decades to
Right.
learn, and it, like, even for me as a cook, like I've been with my wife for 10 years, and we've talked about how like, no, thank you. And we've talked about how like, I've gotten better at cooking over the years, but it's taken like a lot of burnt steaks and really bad meals,
Mhm.
and that's the thing
Yeah.
about cooking is that it's such a subjective process, and that's what's also really difficult about doing it from the entrepreneur side, is like trying to get people to understand your value and trying to get people to understand what you can do, especially since it's so hard to communicate, what you're capable of.
Absolutely. I mean, here's also the point that it was just something that was becoming more apparent, especially as I was just going through year after year after year. Every year, I don't know about you, but every year you kind of you're like, oh man, like let this be the year that, something new and amazing happens, and
Mm-hmm,
like
mm-hmm.
goes like that.
That big break.
Exactly. But it'll happen in its time. But I've had the pleasure, I will say, this new endeavor kind of gave me the opportunity to connect on another level with especially other Asian American entrepreneurs, because there were a lot of people I met who were basically they just want to kind of compartmentalize you and box you in and say, this is all you're capable of doing. One of the things that was the hardest reality to realize was people don't really get what I'm trying to do. When
Mm-hmm,
it
mm-hmm,
really, I thought it makes sense to me, but it's just like, I'm trying to basically use both of these passions in my life to kind of help others, to kind of bridge you almost in a way.
mm-hmm,
The best execution of that came with one event that I usually hold every year, which is the my pre-Thanksgiving feast,
mm-hmm.
um, which I've given for 11 years. And so
Wow.
it was just a way to kind of, the way we start out the party is just everyone's almost forced to connect over, not forced, but just like, I cannot be that bridge between everybody, unfortunately, at that time, because I'm busy setting up and I'm doing this and that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
But I do set up things that will kind of calm you or kind of give you a base to kind of bond with somebody else, only if you want to. So I had wonderful friends who had a house in Brooklyn, who it was the perfect intimate setup, because they were my friend had worked for Lego for a very long time, and they had kind of gotten me into helping them with that for Lego robotics. So
mm-hmm.
there were a lot of cool knickknacks they had collected over the years. They set up a Lego table. I had put out paints and things for people to just kind of, a paint and sip,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
pretty much just for, if you're not feeling comfortable, but this is a way for you to kind of just do your thing, kind of see if somebody's enticed by the activity that you're doing, or just a way for you to kind of come away with something from this event.
Mm-hmm.
And then we'll get into the eating and
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and all this other wonderful stuff that kind of bonds us together. And and then I try to do a sing along at the end of the night, because that's what my parents did at the end of the night.
Mm-hmm.
Those were some sleepless nights, but it was like, but it's just one of those things where it's always going to kind of be this way, I think, for especially speaking to fellow artists and anybody for that matter, who just is faced with the fact that people don't really understand what you're trying to do until you actually see it for yourself, experience it for yourself, kind of, give it a little shot, introduce yourself to something. That's basically how anybody's going to get it. So it's taken time for sure. And again, I could have taken shortcuts and taken someone else's, like, why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? And until you find something that just kind of is something that's become your own, and just something that you roll with and that people get just by receiving it. That's how this has all come to be. And also because I explained this to a student of mine who we went to an art gallery, and he again didn't understand. He's like, I don't get it. I don't get this. I'm looking at. But I basically told him, I said, it's not about understanding it. It's not about, it's like, there is an appreciation, of course. I said, but your brain isn't, I was like, your brain is going to absorb new information
Mm-hmm,
and
mm-hmm,
take it or leave it. But that it's opening up channels that you didn't open for yourself.
mm-hmm.
This is what art is going to do for you. This is what an experience is going to do for you.